Hello everyone, this is Carla and welcome back to the studio. And thank you for joining me for another episode of Step It Up Saturday. For this Saturday, I will be featuring the Apple Harvest stamp set. I will also be using the coordinating dies Apple Blossoms that were available, I believe, a year ago. Now these have since retired. However, as of the time of me posting this video, so Saturday, November 4th of 2023, these are in the clearance rack in the online store. And I believe that the price for these in US dollars is 14. So if these dies are something that you would like to get to coordinate with the stamp set, may I suggest going to the online store and getting these while they're still available. I will have a link to these in the description of this video. So let me get started. So for our first card, I have a piece of Crumb Cake cardstock. It measures 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4.25. I have a piece of 3 by 3 in cherry cobbler and a 2.5 by 2.5 very vanilla cardstock. So for these two pieces here, for the cherry cobbler, I'm going to be using two circle punches. I'm using the 2 3/8 inch circle punch, and I will punch out my cherry cobbler with that punch. Okay, and I'll set that aside. Now I'm also going to be using the 2 1/4 inch circle punch for my very vanilla. Now this punch is retired, so if you have it, or maybe you have a different brand that's in this size, there's also dies that you can use as well that is about proximate to this size. So before I use this punch, I'm going to actually stamp my image on this cardstock first. So I will take my card base and I will fold it and burnish it. And I will set this aside for a moment. I will bring in my stamp. So I have this single apple and I have my greeting that says, "Hope you are feeling better." And then this little decorative image that's in the set. So I'm going to bring in my early espresso ink. I will be using this ink to stamp all of the images. We'll be doing some coloring with our Stampin' Blends. So I got that inked up, and I will stamp that in the middle. Okay. And I'm done with this color. I will also bring in the other inks that I'll be using. So I'll be using Crumb Cake and Cherry Cobbler. So while this image is drying just a little bit before we color it, I am going to stamp on my card base, and I'm going to use Crumb Cake and this decorative image, and I'm going to stamp it once up in this corner, and then I will flip it around and I will stamp it down in this bottom corner right here. Okay, we're done with that. And then with my cherry cobbler ink, I'm going to bring in my greeting that says, "Hope you are feeling better." I will ink this up. Now the early espresso ink, if you notice that I have them like laying upside down like this, I just re-inked these today, so they are just a little bit extra inky. So normally when these are closed and you store them the right way up, the ink pad faces down, so the ink is at the surface of your pad whenever you use it. But because I re-inked it and I just decided, let me sit it down upside down so that way the ink is actually going into the pad. So I will take this stamp and I will stamp down in the lower left, and hopefully we get it straight. Very good. I was worried about it going crooked on me. Okay, so we are done with our ink pads. Okay, so we'll set this aside because now we're going to come in and we're going to color, and then, well, actually I can punch this out first. So we're going to kind of center that and punch that out. Okay, and then the blends that I'm going to be using for this card is our deep number 100 for the stem. And then I have the dark and the light Daffodil Delight. We're going to be doing a golden delicious apple for this card. And then I have dark and light Old Olive. So for this part, I am going to speed it up. So I'll see you in just a bit. Okay, so we're done with our coloring. And then I'm going to adhere this piece onto my cherry cobbler circle. And center that. Like so. And then I will use a few dimensionals on the back. One more in the middle. Out of all of the reds that Stampin' Up! Has had for their inks and cardstock and such, Cherry Cobbler is one of my favorites. Okay, so I'm going to place this down in the lower right hand corner so that way you can see some of the design that I had stamped down in this corner. Then I'm going to bring in the Glossy Dots assortment. This is in our annual catalog. And I am going to add 3 of these Daffodil Delight dots. Add one there. One here and one of the teeny tiny ones right up here. And then to add a little bit more sparkle to it, I'm going to bring in my Wink of Stella, and I'm going to add some onto my apple and onto the leaves. I find that when I add Wink of Stella to a colored image, it kind of brings out the color and makes it look a bit more vibrant. And plus it adds some of that sparkle to it as well. We'll add some on this leaf. Okay. Okay, so that is our first card, our simple card. Now on to the second. Okay, so for my second card, I have a piece of Granny Apple Green measuring 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. A piece of Petal Pink measuring 5 1/4 by 4. Very Vanilla 5 1/8 by 3 7/8. A piece of Very Vanilla measuring 3.5 by 3.5. And a 4 by 1 inch Very Vanilla. So I'll start off with folding and burnishing my card base. So the apple that we'll be doing for this card is a Granny Smith. So it'll be mostly like in greens. So I will set this aside. The Petal Pink will also be a layer, so I'll set that one aside. For this larger Very Vanilla, I'm going to be using this embossing folder, and this is from the Basics 3D embossing folders that can be found in the online store under Online Exclusives. So I will set this aside because all the die cutting, embossing, and coloring I will do all at the same time. So for this piece, I'm going to stamp that with this apple image, and I'm going to bring in my early espresso ink again. And I want to stamp this. I want to do like some light taps into the ink. Because again, I just re-inked this ink pad, so it's pretty inky. And I will stamp that in the middle. Just holding it down for a moment so that way the ink will transfer onto the cardstock. Okay, we'll set that aside. And then for this piece here, I'm going to stamp our greeting. And I'm going to do that in our Granny Apple Green ink. And the greeting is, the greatest gift is a good friend. And I'm going to stamp that in the middle of this piece. Ink this up. I'm going to put it in the middle. Don't have to worry about it being straight. Okay. So we're done with the stamping. Okay, and then for this image here, I'll be die cutting with this die. And for the greeting, I will be using this die to die cut that. So I'll put this aside. I'll put this aside. And I'm at the part now where I'm going to speed up the video. I'm going to color this first. Let me show you what colors we'll be using. So I'll be using the same Deep 100 for the stems. I will also be using the light and dark Mossy Meadow, and the dark and light Granny Apple Green, of course. Got to use that one. And then the dark and light Petal Pink Stampin' Blend. Okay, so I'll see you in just a bit. So let's bring in all of our pieces. So I am going to take our embossed piece, and it's really cool because when you look at this like star or flower type image, it almost looks like as if you had cut the apple in half, and that pit area where the pits are, it almost resembles that, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to adhere this down to my petal pink piece. Make sure I got an adhesive towards the corners. So there's going to be just a slight border around. Like so. Okay. And then I'm going to bring in my dimensionals. And I'm going to put some on the back of my apple. Okay. And then I will also add some on the back of my greeting. Let's see, look, the larger ones fit on here. Yeah, they will. Let's put one on this end, and then we just need one more in the middle. Okay, so we'll set these aside, and actually I'll adhere this to our card base. See if I'll have enough adhesive in this. Yeah, just had enough for this card. Okay, so I will center this on the card base. Like so. Okay, and then my apple, I'll go ahead and I'll pop that up on my card base. I'll put that about here. And then my greeting, I will put that centered right below it. Just a little bit. Make sure that's straight. Looks straight. Yep, looks good. Okay. Then I'm going to come in with my Wink of Stella again. And this time I'm just going to add it to the actual apple itself rather than on the leaves. And then I will also add some, little spot there, and I'll add some onto the flowers as well. Okay. And then I'm going to bring in some linen thread and some glue dots. And actually I already had cut a piece of linen thread earlier. So I'm going to bring in my Take Your Pick tool, and I'm going to add a glue dot right here on the stem. These glue dots are what's left over from old paper pumpkin kits. So I have so many of these. They're just as good as the ones that are in the catalog that are on the roll. So I'm going to go ahead and tie a bow. see. Don't need a really big looped bow. That's good. And one of the things I like to do with the ends, especially with linen thread, you see how it's because of it being on that spool, it kind of has a curl to it. So I'm going to cut this just to make the tails even. And what I like to do is put my finger and hold the knot itself and then bring in my bone folder. And I just like you would do with curling ribbon for packages, I will do the same thing to the tails of my boat. Just give it a little bit of a curl to it. Trying to get them kind of going a different opposite direction. Okay, good. And then I'm just going to stick this down in that glue dot so we have a nice tail of that bow. And then to embellish this, I'm going to bring in my iridescent rhinestone basic jewels. I'm bringing my take your pick tool, and then I'm going to add a few of these to my card. See, we want one of these. Put that over there, and then on one of our smaller ones, we'll put right up here. Okay, so that is our second card. On to our third. Okay, so for my third card, our image is going to be just a little bit bigger, so there's going to be a little bit more coloring to it. So I'm going to start off with a piece of crumb cake measuring 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. A piece of cherry cobbler measuring 5.5 by 4 1/4. A piece of crumb cake. Now, there's two pieces that are similar in size. So one of them is 4 1/4 by 3, and the other piece is 4 1/4 by 3.5. This larger piece is the one that we're going to stamp our image on. This piece we're going to be die cutting. So for the die cutting, I'm going to be using the Radiating Stitches dies. These are in the online store under the online exclusives, and I'll be using these two frame dies. I'm going to use a smaller one for the crumb cake and then this larger one for the cherry cobbler. So I'm going to set those aside because all the coloring and the die cutting I'm going to do at the same time. So for my card base, I'm going to fold and burnish that. And we'll set that aside. And then for this piece, I'm going to stamp my larger grouping of apples. So I'll bring in my early espresso. And I'm going to take the ink pad to the stamp and just lightly tap again because the ink pad is really inky. I don't want to mash the stamp in and then end up with ink along the edges, because if you happen to rock the stamp onto your cardstock, what'll happen, you'll end up getting this edge on there as well, and you don't want that. Just make sure I'm getting ink on the shadow part in the middle there. Okay, and then I'm going to stamp this in the middle. Just hold that for a moment. Now, with this, I will be using the Stampin' Blends again. So for this one, I'm going to be using the medium deep number 300, the light cherry cobbler, and the light mossy meadow. I'm going with the lighter colors because we will be coloring on a darker colored piece of cardstock. And the middle part didn't get so. Cardstock has two sides to it, so we're going to use the other side, and hopefully we're going to get a nice crisp image. Yeah, see, that's on the edge there, so I don't want to rock it. I'll stamp that. Just let that sit for a moment. The other thing I don't want to do is push really hard on this block either. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so I'm just going to let that sit. Well, no, we actually need to color this so that way we can die cut it, which there is a coordinating die for that, so I'll set that aside as well. Okay, there is a greeting that I will stamp on the bottom of this piece here, but I'm going to die cut that first, and the greeting will say, "Thanks for your kindness." Okay, so now this is where I'm going to speed up the video, so I'm going to color my apples, and then I will also do the die cutting as well. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So before I assemble my card, two tips that I want to make mention of. So when you go to use your Stampin' Blends, your alcohol markers on a colored cardstock like this, you want to have a really soft touch with it. You don't want to do a lot of like pressing with the tip onto the paper, and also not, coloring in one spot doing a lot of coloring in one spot is what I'm trying to say. Because the colored cardstock is more porous, the ink will start to bleed out of your lines. It did that a little bit on my coloring here, but it's not bad. It's okay. The very vanilla and the basic white cardstocks that we have, there's a coating on it, so it's a little bit smoother when you're coloring. So when using your alcohol markers on colored cardstock, just have a soft, gentle touch as you're coloring. Also, you may have noticed that when I die cut anything that is like a rectangular or square shape, I will put it in at an angle like this. If you put it this way and you run it through your machine, you won't get like that really loud clunking sound where you think your machine has broke. It hasn't. If you put it in straight like this, when it hits that flat edge, that's when it makes that loud clunking sound as you're putting it through. So I always put it in like at an angle like this. Okay, so now with that being said, let's go ahead and put our card together. So for my cherry cobbler piece, I'm going to add some adhesive, and I may need to add some. And when I put adhesive on this, you can see there's this stitch edging on here. I'm going to put the adhesive within that stitched border. So I'm going to add my adhesive. Oop, we hit the end. So since we hit the end, I'm going to show you how you can refill your Stampin' Seal or even your Stampin' Seal Plus. So here's one of our refills. You'll pull that out and then just open this up. Now there's like some adhesive that's on the ends of it, so I'm just going to take this out and then I'll just kind of pull off that gunky adhesive. We'll get rid of that. And then the two holes that you see here, you will just put that like so into that, and then put your cover back on. And then this is now garbage. So to advance your adhesive, once you've put the new one in, bring in your silicone craft sheet and just roll it a little bit and it'll bring the adhesive up to the tip. Okay, and so I'll just add a little bit more and then I will adhere this to our card base. Let's center that on there, like so. Like that, yeah, that looks good. Press that down. And then on this piece, I'm going to bring in my early espresso ink. And then I will stamp my greeting, thanks for your kindness. And let's see if we can get this stamped straight and not crooked. Put that there. Make sure that's straight. And then, let's see. Okay, well, it's a little bit crooked, but it'll be okay. This one we couldn't exactly just flip it over and stamp it because then you really wouldn't see the stitching all too well around that piece. So that'll be okay. Alright, so then we'll go and adhere this piece into the center of our cherry cobbler piece. It fits in there perfectly. Okay, and then I will put dimensionals on the back of our apples. Ooh, look at that hot mess back there. We'll just put a few of these on there. Then let's see, we'll add one more up there and then just one more down here. There's a lot of dimensionals on here. Okay, so we'll remove our paper backing. And then we'll put this down right here. And then I'll bring in my Wink of Stella and I'll just put some on the apples on this one as well instead of also on the leaves. And one of the things you want to be careful with the Wink of Stella, to get more of the glitter from this, you can squeeze this, but don't ever squeeze it right over your project because you could end up with a big puddle of this on there and that wouldn't look good. I mean, it'd be really sparkly, but if you ever feel that, you're using it and there's not much coming out from the brush, you can squeeze it, but do it over like some scrap paper. Okay, so that's that. And for my embellishments, I'm going to use the Festive Pearls. These are in our annual catalog. And the red in this is Cherry Cobbler, so I will add 3 of these onto my card. Okay, and we'll put one right there. Okay, so that is our 3rd card. This one has just a little more detail and coloring onto it. So let me bring in the other 2 cards that we made. So this was our simple beginner card. Actually, let me move this out of the way. So there was our first card. And then here was our second one, a little bit stepped up. So our first one was the Golden Delicious apple. This was our Granny Smith. Okay. And then this was our 3rd one. So I don't know, Washington apple? Red. So those are our 3 cards. And just bring them so you can see them. So I thank you for joining me for this episode of Step It Up Saturday. If you had liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you could, please subscribe to my channel and then click on the little notification bell and it'll let you know when I upload another video. So the next video will then be Throwback Thursday and I will be doing another fall themed card. I don't know what bundle or set that I'm using as of yet, but I will have that for Thursday and then there'll be another Step It Up Saturday that I will do using the Autumn Suite. I don't know the name right offhand, but the Autumn Suite that's in our current mini catalog. So I thank you for joining me, and everyone have a great day. Bye bye.